Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, and thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. Because of you, Mingles with Jingles is advert free. Except for that, which was kind of an advert for Patreon. So, you know. Anyway, moving on swiftly. How do you like the new intro? That was made for me by Joe Thomas. And before Universal tries to sue me, it's a parody, okay? Jeez, take a joke. Right, anyway, so what's up this week? I read a very interesting article on PC Gamer a couple of days ago, and it was all to do with PC games sales, and specifically games that make it on Steam. In a presentation that was given by an independent games developer who goes by the name of Mike Rose, he revealed isn't really the right word, he pointed out that in February last month, around about 850 games were released on Steam. That's about 40 games a day. Now obviously the vast majority of games that get pushed out on Steam Direct barely qualify to be called games in the first place. They're just lazy asset flips that have been pushed out in order to make a fast buck. But here's the thing, because there are so many of them, another interesting statistic that Mike Rose revealed was that about 82% of those 850 games didn't even make minimum wage. And what he means by that is the amount of revenue brought in by 82% of the 850 games that were released on Steam in the month of February didn't even earn the equivalent of the American minimum wage for a month. Now it's probably fair to say that a huge number of those games released on Steam in February probably didn't even deserve to earn that much because they were nothing other than asset flips. I should probably explain what an asset flip is. An asset flip is a term in the gaming industry that refers to the practice of building a game almost entirely out of pre-made assets with no or little original work and then just releasing it as a game. I believe the term asset flip to describe these kind of so-called games may have even been coined by Jim Sterling of the Jimquisition. But anyway, 850 games, 82% of which didn't even make minimum wage. Majority are going to be asset flips, don't deserve to make minimum wage in the first place, but there are also going to be a fair number of independent games published on Steam in the month of February amongst those 850 games that have actually had a lot of care and attention lavished upon them. There are also going to be some independent games published on Steam in the month of February that did have a lot of care and attention lavished on them but kind of sucked anyway. But there are still going to be some good games out there. And here's the problem. Some of those are also going to be included in the 82% that didn't even make minimum wage. Why? Because nobody ever got to hear about them. Why did nobody ever get to hear about them? Because there were 850 games published on Steam in the month of February. Unless your game was lucky enough to pop up in somebody's discovery queue, and not everybody bothers to even check out their discovery queue, or unless your game was featured on the Steam front page, it doesn't matter how good your game was. It's not even going to get noticed in the deluge of shit that gets published on Steam every month. Just as an experiment, right before doing this episode of Mingles with Jingles, I logged into Steam and I hit the upcoming games button, sorted them by release date, and I went to see, because obviously I record this on Sunday, so this was on the 25th, I went to have a look and just see how many games were coming out on Steam on March the 26th, today. 57. 57. There may be some good games amongst that 57, but who has the time to go through 57 titles in a day? The majority of which are going to be horrible asset flips to actually find if there are any decent games coming out on Steam. And that's just on one day. I don't have time to do that, and I do this for a living. This is incredibly bad news for independent games developers because, well, it used to be the case that if you managed to get your game published on Steam, you'd basically made it. But those days are long gone. With the advent of Steam Direct, pretty much anybody can publish just about anything on Steam these days and call it a game. And Steam itself exercises zero quality control over this. In fact, it pretty much just abrogates all responsibility for quality control to the Steam curators. What are the Steam curators? Well, to go by the official explanation of what a Steam curator is, They are individuals or organisations that make recommendations to help others discover interesting games in the Steam catalogue. Okay, so they're basically people just like you or me who make a habit of actually posting reviews of games that they have played on Steam. But once again, we're right back to the initial problem of sheer quantity. Over 6,000 games released on Steam in 2017, 850 games released on Steam in February, anything up to 57 games released on Steam today alone, March the 26th. The curators don't have the time to wade through the sheer amount of shit that has to be included in that sheer volume of games releases. There is basically no quality control whatsoever. Let me just give you an example of how ridiculously the odds are stacked against you, regardless of how good your game is. If you're trying to get your game noticed, and therefore make any money on Steam. There's an independent developer who go by the name of Castle Pixel, and they developed a game called Blossom Tales: The Sleeping King. No, I'd never heard of it either. It's a Zelda clone apparently, and judging by all of the reviews that I've seen of the game, it's a very, very good Zelda clone. They released it on Steam a year ago, March 2017. So far, 84% of the 66 user reviews of this game on Steam have been very positive. It's been a very well reviewed game if you like that sort of thing, you know, Zelda clones. Not everybody does, obviously. But those who have played it, in the overwhelming majority of cases, liked it enough to recommend it. But after being on sale on Steam for 9 months, with very positive reviews from anybody who bothered to play it, the game basically wasn't even making minimum wage, and the developers were about to go bankrupt. So they released it on the Nintendo Switch, where you could buy it in the Nintendo Switch store. And they did that in December of 2017, so just over 3 months ago. In 3 months, on the Nintendo Switch, where it has also been reviewed by websites such as NintendoLife.com, where it received 7 out of 10. In 3 months, it's made 20 times as much on Nintendo Switch as it's made in an entire year on Steam. Now, Castle Pixel were a very, very lucky developer because they were about to go bankrupt until Nintendo themselves approached them and suggested that they port the game over to the Nintendo Switch, where it found a home, as it deserved to. It is, if you like that sort of thing, a very, very good game. But not everybody's going to be that lucky. Most independent developers, all they can really afford to do is launch their game on Steam Direct, cross their fingers and hope for the best. Maybe they'll get lucky, but let's face it, the odds are stacked against them. On the other hand, if they manage to get the attention of a high-profile YouTuber or live streamer, for example, you can see where this is going, can't you? That can really help them get their game noticed. Subnautica, just as one example, profited immensely from getting high-profile YouTubers like Markiplier, for example, playing the game when it was still in early access. As a result of that, Steam itself perked up, paid attention, and started featuring Subnautica on their front page. And the rest, as they say, is history. But this places an uncomfortable amount of power and responsibility in the hands of high-profile YouTubers and streamers. And I'm not really comfortable with that kind of power. The power to affect the livelihood of an independent games developer based purely on whether or not I happen to like a game that they've given me a Steam review code for. Sometimes it works out very well for all concerned. Do you remember Heliborn from Jetcat Games, another independent developer, self-publishing on Steam Direct, with zero marketing budget? And just the fact that I happened to catch their game and do a release day video on it, it brought the game to your attention. A lot of you liked the look of the game so much that you decided to give it a try yourself and were very pleasantly surprised at how good a game it was. So I was happy because I enjoyed playing the game and I enjoyed doing the video on the game. You guys were happy because you'd been exposed to a game that you may otherwise have never heard of and enjoyed playing. And obviously Jetcat Games were very happy because the release day video helped their release day sales of the game immeasurably. Everybody was a winner. But that's just one game. Anything up to 57 are coming out on Steam today. Yesterday I took a look at my business email address folder. There were a couple of hundred unread emails in there, and I just don't have the time to go through that amount of spam. so I deleted them all. Right now, I'm looking at the same email folder, and one day later, there are another 24 emails. And just looking at the titles of those emails, slightly more than half are going to contain Steam keys to review independent games being self-published on Steam. So, assuming that those ratios hold true for everything that was in my business email folder, when I deleted around about 250 emails yesterday, probably around about 150 of those would have contained review keys for games that are being self-published on Steam by independent developers who are trying to stir up some kind of interest in their game before it went on sale, or even after it went on sale. And I didn't even look at them. And I didn't look at them for a very good reason, because there were 250 emails in my business folder. There are another 24 today, and probably 15 of them are for Steam games. And who has time to install and play 15 different games on Steam every day? I don't, and I do this for a living. So what can we do about it? Because I do feel for independent games developers. It used to be the case that if you managed to get your game published on Steam, you were made, you'd done it. But with the advent of Steam Direct, yeah, not anymore. And then I remembered what we talked about in Mingles with Jingles last week, which is becoming something of a running joke, which I don't mind. I love a good trolling as much as anybody else. But we talked about game recommendations, didn't we, in last week's Mingles with Jingles, and not just me recommending games to you, which you may enjoy. Games like Subnautica, games like Cold Waters, Fractured Space, Heliborn, but also the fact that, well, Subnautica, perfect example, a game that I would never have heard of. Well, no, that's not true. I had heard of it, but I didn't really like the look of it from what I saw of it on Steam. But so many of you had said, Jingles, you have to try this game, that I gave it a shot. And I'm immensely grateful that I listened to your recommendation, because it's one of the best games I've ever played. So while I really do want to be doing what I can to help out independent games developers who have genuinely good games, and trying to bring them to your attention so that the games can enjoy the success that they deserve, there's just no way I can be downloading, installing and playing 15 different Steam games every day. But what I can do is look at the recommendations that you guys have been making, and hopefully will continue to make, in the comments of the videos that I upload, because it's certainly worked out well for everybody in the past. Now, while we're on the subject of games that you lot have recommended, a lot of you have been recommending that I give Sea of Thieves a go. Has anybody played it? Because it came out last week, and I'd be very interested in hearing your opinions of the game, because I was kind of reluctant to try it, and for three reasons. First of all, the price. It's an expensive game. Secondly, you can only get it on the Microsoft Store or Xbox Live, which is basically the same thing. And third, I watched a couple of YouTube videos and watched a couple of Sea of Thieves live streams to decide whether or not it was going to be the sort of thing for me. And I have to admit, it looked like the sort of thing that could get kind of boring pretty quick. There didn't seem to be an awful lot to do in it other than sailing around, digging up treasure, and fighting skeletons. And I didn't really see where the gameplay was. But I gave it a go anyway, because so many of you had recommended it. And I did see why so many of you had recommended it. It is a fun game, but it's not without some fairly significant problems. Now, I'm not going to be doing a video on Sea of Thieves. I'll probably still be live streaming it at some point in the future, but instead I was going to talk about it in this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles and explain exactly why I feel the way I do about this game. And again, be very interested to hear how many of you guys have had the same experience with Sea of Thieves. So, first things first, do not, under any circumstances, buy this game if you intend to play it alone, because it sucks as a single player experience. It's absolutely terrible. This game is only worth playing in cooperation with friends, and that's where it runs into its first pretty serious set of problems. First problem. I'm always on the lookout for games that I can play with Rita because I do enjoy playing games with her, and this looked like a pretty solid candidate. So I went ahead and bought myself a copy, and then I tried to buy her a copy as well. The operative word here being tried to. You can't do that on the Windows Store. You can do that on Steam, and I've done that before on Steam. I got myself and her copies of Warhammer Vermintide 2, which we both enjoyed playing as well. It's very easy on Steam. One copy for yourself, one copy as a gift. Have you ever tried doing the same thing on the Windows Store? Yeah, good luck with that. Doesn't work. Which is a bit of a problem for a game that's utter dog shit if you're trying to play yourself. Has to be played with friends in order to be even remotely playable or enjoyable, but which won't allow you to buy copies of the game for your friends. So that's a bit of an issue. But anyway, we got around that. Next issue. Actually getting your friend to play the game with you, even when both of you have the game downloaded, installed, and are sitting there at the in-game menu trying to invite your friend to play the game with you. It's so much harder than it needs to be. Foolishly, we thought it would be a simple case of going to the multiplayer voyage menu in Sea of Thieves and just inviting each other to join our crew. You'd think it would be that simple. It should be that simple. It is far from that simple. First, I headed over to the Microsoft Store when, just trying to invite Rita to join me for a game in-game wasn't working, and added her as a friend on the Microsoft Store. She then had to go to the Microsoft Store and accept the friend invitation. So there we go. Now we're officially friends. And she still wasn't showing up as a friend within the Sea of Thieves multiplayer menu. So then Rita, I'm not making this up, right? So then Rita did the same thing. She went to the Microsoft Store, where I was already her friend, and sent me a friend request, which I then accepted. And then we went back and tried it. No, it still didn't want to work. Eventually, we thought, why don't we head to the Xbox Live platform and make sure we're both friends there as well. And we went through the entire same process there. So now, I've sent her a friend request, which she accepted on the Windows Store. She sent me a friend request, which I've accepted on the Windows Store, and then we've done the same thing on Xbox Live as well. And we still couldn't get into a game together at the in-game menu. Eventually, the only way we could get it to work, and remember, this is a game that lives or dies on its multiplayer cooperative experience. Eventually, we got it to work by going to the Xbox Live app and inviting each other to play a game there. And that's the only way we could actually get the game to put us both on board the same ship. So that was far harder than it needed to be. Unfortunately, that was kind of just the start of our problems. You see, there's no tutorial in Sea of Thieves. At all. Hello, 21st century calling? Yeah. Now that's not so much of an issue if you were playing a single player exploration and survival game, for example, where you had to figure out what it was you needed to do to survive, because that's kind of the whole point. But you're playing Sea of Thieves, which is very much a multiplayer co-op and PvP game. You can be set upon by other pirates at any time. And if you don't even know how to equip a weapon, because the game doesn't try to show you, you can see how this can be a less than satisfying multiplayer PvP experience for the uninitiated. Now, luckily, before I started trying to play a game with friends, the night before, I logged in and just had a go myself, purely to get used to the way the game worked, master the basic concepts, and have some sort of idea of what I could expect. And it's a good job that I did, because seriously, I didn't even know how to equip a weapon until I discovered it by accident. The game does offer some basic hints. Right at the start, it will tell you to, for example, press Q to bring up your inventory. But there are no weapons in your inventory. They're hidden away, and it doesn't tell you how to access your weapons. In fact, I was lucky enough to discover this completely by accident when I just started rolling the mouse wheel around to see if that did anything, and sure enough, a weapon suddenly popped up into my hand. So I discovered how to defend myself in a multiplayer PvP game completely by accident. I can't help but feel there's a better way of doing this. Anyway, the fun was just beginning. When you start playing Sea of Thieves for the first time, in fact, every time you log into Sea of Thieves, it dumps you in a pirate outpost with a ship, and then just leaves you to get on with things. And that's good. You know, I enjoy freedom in a game as much as anybody else. But some kind of hints as to what you're supposed to be doing, and how you're supposed to be doing it. You know, for the benefit of people who haven't actually played the game before, which, let's face it, is every single one of us the first time we log in, this sort of thing would be good. So, faced with a complete absence of any kind of instructions as to what it is I should actually be doing, and seeing a ship sitting in front of me, just waiting for me to sail, that's exactly what I did. Now, to be completely fair here, Sea of Thieves absolutely nails the whole sailing a pirate ship experience. It really is superb, and I had all kinds of fun just sailing around, trimming the sails, reefing the sails, setting the angle of the sails, working the anchor, checking out the map, plotting courses, all sorts of stuff. The sea, in particular, is spectacularly good. They have absolutely nailed the experience of conning a sailing ship around through pirate-infested waters. I can't praise them enough for just how good that part of the game is. But once the novelty of all that wore off, I started to think to myself, I'm not actually doing anything here. You know, amusing though this may be, I'm sure there's more to the game than this. And there is more to the game than that. So I checked my map after stopping at an island or two and killing some chickens. No, really. And headed back to the nearest pirate outpost to see exactly what the hell was going on. And this is where I found the voyage system. And that's basically what Sea of Thieves is. There are 3 different types of voyages that you can buy from vendors. One type of voyage involves trying to claim the heads of undead pirate kings. Another type of voyage involves digging up buried treasure. And the third type of voyage involves making deliveries. I thought I'd try out some of the delivery voyages first. Once again, the whole issue of the game just basically leaving you to your own thing reared its ugly head. I picked up a mission, or a voyage as it's known in Sea of Thieves, to deliver some chickens to somebody. Okay, where are these chickens then? Hello? And the game just like, nope, figure it out for yourself. Okay, fair enough. Now, as I mentioned in my previous adventure, I'd killed a couple of chickens, so there are chickens running around on some of the islands in Sea of Thieves, so I jumped back on board my ship with a chicken coop in my hands, and that is where I ran into the second major issue in Sea of Thieves. When I accepted this mission, it gave me a chicken coop, presumably to hold the chickens in. The game doesn't tell you how to actually put the chicken coop down. I'm like, what, left mouse button? No. Right mouse button? No. Oh, I know, I'll use the mouse wheel to cycle through my weapons. No, that didn't work. Alright, pause the game, go to the menu, keyboard commands, settings, yeah, here it is. Drop. Okay, alright, I found the drop key. So I dropped the chicken coop in the captain's cabin on board my sloop, set sail for the nearest island, sure enough, spotted some chickens squawking around on the beach. So picked up the chicken coop again, jumped over the side, swam to the island. Right, how do I actually capture these chickens? Once again, you've got to figure it out for yourself. And it turns out it's actually fairly simple. You just, basically, with the chicken coop in your hands, you run over a chicken, and the chicken is magically transported into the coop. Fantastic, we're making progress here. Not a particularly difficult mission. Swim back to the ship with a chicken coop in my hands. Chicken didn't really seem to like the whole experience of being underwater, but whatever, you know. Back on board the ship, dropped the chicken in the coop, in the captain's cabin, sailed back to the vendor who gave me the voyage to collect the chicken coop. I've got your chicken. And he just like, nope. Oh, God. Not this again. Okay. Let's have a look at the voyage again. Oh, right, I see where I'm going wrong. I have to actually deliver these chickens to somebody. So, where is this person? And once again, I'm not... Seriously, I am not making this up. The game just sort of like crossed its arms and said, nope. It gave me a delivery mission and wouldn't even tell me where the person was I was supposed to be delivering the mission to. Apparently, there is another key that you can press, and I didn't discover this until much, much later, because guess what? Once again, game doesn't bother to tell you, where you can pull up your voyage maps or something, where it will give you the location of whoever it is you're supposed to make the delivery to. But it doesn't tell you this. You have to figure it out for yourself. Meanwhile, I turned around, and at the end of the jetty, my ship had sunk. Why had my ship sunk? I have absolutely no idea. None whatsoever. There was nothing wrong with it when I left it, but by the time I'd made it to the chicken coop vendor and turned around, the only thing I could see was the mainmast just kind of forlornly sticking out of the water. So what did I learn from that experience? Sometimes your ship just sinks. I mean, well, of course it doesn't. Obviously there's a reason as to why my ship had sunk. But the game didn't bother to tell me. Are you seeing a pattern emerging here? Anyway, the fun and games was only just getting started. The next day, after going through, I'm not making this up, half an hour in a multiplayer co-op game, just trying to activate the whole multiplayer part of it, I eventually managed to get on board the same ship as Rita. Just a little sloop that we could sail around together and have adventures on the high seas. And armed with my experience of the day before, I had some kind of idea of the kind of things that we should and shouldn't be doing. So we approached one of the voyage vendors, and this time we got some treasure hunting missions. And these are fairly straightforward. You just get a map, find the relevant island, X marks the spot, dig up the treasure. There may be some skeletons that you have to fight on the way, but the major threat is really going to be other players jacking your ship while you're busy digging up treasure. Well, we didn't have to deal with any of that. Nice and straightforward, dug up the treasure, took it back to the treasure voyage vendor, handed the treasure over, and nothing. I thought, is that it? Am I going to get nothing for doing this? If I'm going to get nothing for doing this, where's my incentive to keep doing this? And I'm not joking here. 4 minutes later, I'm busy rummaging around crates on the island looking for wooden planks to stock up on our repair materials. 4 minutes after handing the voyage in, a pop-up appears saying, "Congratulations! You have successfully completed a voyage and earned reputation with the treasure hunting faction." 4 minutes after I handed the mission in. Oh my god. The next day, Saturday night, I'd agreed to join Mighty McGrain for a Sea of Thieves live stream, which he was running on his Twitch channel. So, the first thing that we had to do was spend 35 minutes on his live stream just trying to get to the stage where he could successfully invite both myself and Rita and one other of his friends to a voyage on the same ship. In a multiplayer game that lives or dies on its multiplayer co-op experience. Holy shit. They couldn't have done it in a worse way if they'd specifically set out to sabotage the success of their game. If that had been their single overriding priority, how can we design a multiplayer co-op game that's the biggest possible pain in the arse to play with your friends? They couldn't have done a better job. I do have to stress, however, in all fairness to Sea of Thieves, despite the game being as determined as it possibly can to make it as hard as it possibly can to actually play it with your friends, once you get past the initial, oh my god, why does it have to be this hard experience, It is an incredibly fun game to play. We had all kinds of fun assaulting a pirate boss outpost in our galleon while coming under attack from a bunch of other players in their own galleon and having to fight them off and grab the loot and then make our escape and get back to the pirate outpost and hand in. It was immense fun. It really, really was. But I can't help but feel that there was far too much messing around in the Windows Store and the Xbox Live app, just trying to get into the same game as our friends and then figuring out what it was we're supposed to be doing and how we were supposed to be doing it, until we got to the stage where we could actually enjoy playing the game. So I'm curious to know what the experience has been of other people who started playing Sea of Thieves the week it was released as well. Let me know in the comments. Well, anyway, we're going to conclude this episode of Mingles with Jingles with something that I said I was going to start doing a couple of weeks ago in Mingles with Jingles, and then because I'm crap completely forgot about it despite everybody reminding me of it in each consecutive episode of Mingles with Jingles. It is the return of this day in history. On this day, in the year 1351, was the Combat of the 30. This was an episode in the Breton War of Succession in France, a war fought to determine who would rule the Duchy of Brittany, where combat was arranged between 30 picked combatants from both sides of the conflict to decide who would control a certain castle. On one side, 30 Franco-Bretonian knights of the House of Blois, fighting on foot, and on the other side, 30 knights of the House of Montfort, supported and paid for by the King of England, also fighting on foot. And it was a hard-fought battle, but the Franco-Bretonian faction emerged victorious, and the battle was celebrated by medieval chroniclers and balladeers as a shining example of the chivalric code. All of which totally overlooks the fact that the Franco-Bretonians only won because one of them was a dirty, cheating bastard. Realising that he'd found himself in a fair fight, he decided, screw this for a game of soldiers, jumped onto a horse, totally against the rules that had been laid down at the start of the battle, and started trampling the opposition underfoot. Also on this day, in the year 1830, the Book of Mormon was published in Palmyra, New York. Book of Mormon, of course, is a sacred religious text of the Church of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. Coincidentally, the Book of Mormon is also the title of a satirical musical written by, amongst others, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of South Park. The musical mocks and satirizes Mormon beliefs and practices and was a wildly successful stage production. In response to this sacrilegious yet hilarious musical, thousands of Mormons strapped suicide bombs to their chests and attempted to murder the musical's producers. Oh wait, no, that's not actually what happened. What did in fact happen is that the Mormon Church took out a full-page advert in Variety magazine and stuck up posters at musical venues showing the play, which basically said, "We hope you enjoyed the show, now try reading the book. The book is always better." Also on this day, in the year 1945, the USA announced victory in the Battle of Iwo Jima. The 3,000 Japanese soldiers who were still fighting on the island at the time apparently didn't get that memo, the last of whom surrendered a mere 4 years later on the 6th of January 1949. On this day, in the year 1954, the Romeo shot of the atomic weapons test program known as Operation Castle was detonated at Bikini Atoll in the South Pacific. The yield of the explosion was 11 megatons, which was a little bit of a surprise to the personnel gathered to observe the results of the tests, because they'd only packed enough sunscreen for 4 megatons, which is what they'd been expecting. And on that quite literal bombshell, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.